They say you can't take it with you, but my son was determined to prove them wrong. He wanted my house, my money, and my mind. He only got one of them. This is the story of how I, a 72-year-old widow, used my son's own high-tech cage to burn his world to the ground. They thought technology made them gods, but they forgot who wrote the original code of survival. My story isn't about revenge. It's about reclamation. If you believe in justice for those the world forgets, follow my story. Like, share, and hit that notification bell because you won't want to miss a single moment of what's coming. My name is Emma, and my story begins with a lie. A simple, calculated lie, delivered over a cup of tea that had gone cold in my hands. The kitchen was filled with the pale, watery light of a Cannon Beach morning, the kind that makes the world look like a faded photograph. My son, David, sat across from me at the old oak table. It was the same table his father, Richard, used to pound his fist on to make a point, leaving small crescent-shaped dents in the wood that I'd traced with my fingers for 40 years. I looked at David, my son, a man in his late 40s with his father's sharp jawline, but with a softness around the eyes that I once thought was mine. I was wrong about that. "David, dear," I began, my voice a carefully constructed instrument of frail certainty. I had rehearsed it in the mirror, practicing the slight quaver, the resigned sigh. "I've finalized all the paperwork. From Richard's pension. It's all settled." He leaned forward, his face a perfect sculpture of filial concern. "That's great, Mom. A weight off your mind, I'm sure." "Yes," I said, taking a slow sip of the bitter tea. "It is. The thing is, after taxes and all the fees, it's only about $1,000 a month." I watched him. It was like watching a predator scent the air. Nothing obvious, nothing you could call out. Just a stillness, a flicker in his eyes, so fast it was more a change in the quality of light than a movement. It was the look of a man doing quick math in his head. $1,000 a month. Not enough to maintain this house. Not enough to be independent, just enough to be a manageable burden. He reached across the table, his hand covering mine. His skin was smooth, lotioned. Unlike his father's, which was always calloused and rough. But the pressure was the same. A gesture that wasn't about comfort, but about ownership. "Don't you worry about a thing, Mom," he said, his voice oozing a practiced sincerity. "We'll manage. Sarah and I will make sure you're taken care of. Whatever you need." But his eyes weren't talking about my needs. They were scanning the room, past me, through the floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the Pacific. They were measuring the square footage, calculating the property value, seeing the magnificent, moody view of Haystack Rock, not as a painting, but as a selling point. The real number, the one deposited into a new account he knew nothing about, was $3,247 a month. It was a comfortable sum. My late husband Richard, a man David idolized as a financial genius, had been nothing if not meticulous. He had built an empire of sensible investments and ironclad accounts. But he had also built a cage for me, a beautiful one with a stunning view, but a cage nonetheless. He was a tyrant of spreadsheets and quiet, cutting remarks. In 30 years of marriage, I had learned that survival required its own set of accounts, its own hidden assets. Secrets were my only real currency. This lie I told my son was my first real secret from him, a small diagnostic test. A stone dropped into the well of his character to see what ripples came back. He squeezed my hand again. "You've been alone in this big place for too long. It's a lot to handle." "I manage," I said, a little too quickly. I pulled my hand away, folding it in my lap. "Of course you do. You're strong, but everyone needs help sometimes." He smiled, and it was a politician's smile. It didn't reach his eyes. "Sarah was thinking, we could help you set up some new systems. You know, smart home stuff, to make things easier, for safety." And there it was. The first turn of the key. His reaction to the lie was the confirmation I dreaded. It was never about care. It was about control. About getting his hands on the last piece of me they hadn't yet tried to claim. This house, my fortress, my prison, my last bastion of self. He saw a crumbling matriarch, a depreciating asset. He didn't see the woman who had survived his father. He had no idea what I was capable of. He stood up, kissing the top of my head. "I've got to run to a meeting. But I'll call you tonight. We'll talk more. Don't you worry, Mom. We've got this." I listened to his expensive car pull away from the gravel drive. I sat at that table for a long time, the silence of the house pressing in. I looked out at the sea. The salt air, usually so clean and sharp, felt heavy in my lungs. The gray waves crashed against the shore, a relentless, churning rhythm. For the first time, I felt a kinship with them. A slow, powerful anger was beginning to build, deep beneath the surface. I had spent my life in a gilded cage built by one man. I would not spend my final years in a digital one built by his son. The strangeness started small, like a mouse scratching in a wall. So subtle you could convince yourself it was nothing. I had always kept the house a little warm. My bones felt the cold more keenly these days. I'd set the smart thermostat, one of David's first gifts, to a pleasant 70 degrees before bed. But I'd wake in the deep of the night, a chill seeping into my marrow, the blankets not enough. I'd shuffle out of bed, my feet cold on the hardwood floors, and the thermostat's little blue screen would read 62. The first time, I blamed myself. I must have brushed against it. The second time, I felt a prickle of unease. The third time, a cold knot of certainty formed in my stomach. I called David. His voice on the phone was a thick syrup of condescension. "Oh, Mom, you're just getting a little forgetful. It happens. Are you sure you didn't just lean on it by mistake? Those touch screens are sensitive." "David, I was asleep. I know I set it to 70. Okay, don't get worked up. It's probably just a glitch in the software. I'll check the app from here." A few clicks on his end. "There. I've reset it for you. See? Easy." He didn't hear what I was saying. He heard what he wanted to hear. A confused old woman who needed her capable son to manage her life. Then there was my little porcelain thrush. It was a small, delicate thing, a gift from my own mother. It had no monetary value, but it held the weight of my entire childhood in its tiny ceramic form. It had sat on the mantelpiece above the fireplace for 20 years. One morning, I came downstairs to make coffee, and it was sitting on the kitchen counter, right next to the sugar bowl. My heart did a painful lurch. It was so jarring, so wrong. It was like finding a single black feather on a pristine white pillow. It didn't belong. I didn't call David that time. I just picked it up, its familiar cool weight a small comfort in my trembling hand, and put it back in its place. I stood there for a long time, just looking at it, trying to will it to stay put. A week later, just 2 weeks after my lie about the pension, David and Sarah came over, their car filled with boxes from Best Buy and Amazon. They were installing the upgrades. "It's for your safety, Emma," Sarah chirped, her voice always an octave too high. She was a real estate agent, and she spoke to me like I was a difficult client. She was trying to flatter into a sale. Her smile was as synthetic as the acrylic nails that tapped a relentless rhythm on her phone screen. With a house this isolated, you can't be too careful. They swarmed the house. David, with his confident, unearned authority, drilled holes in my walls to mount new security cameras. There was one by the front door, one overlooking the back deck, one in the hallway. I watched as he angled the one in the hall just so. It had a perfect view of my bedroom door. "Isn't that a bit much, David?" I asked, my voice small. "It's just for peace of mind, Mom. If you ever have a fall or something, we'll know right away." Sarah was unpacking a sleek white device, the new smart home hub. She placed it on the counter in the kitchen, the nerve center of their new operation. "This is the brain of the whole system," she explained, not looking at me, but at the device, her reflection a distorted mask in its glossy surface. "We can link everything to it, the thermostat, the locks, the cameras, even the lights." They spent the next 4 hours turning my home into a network. They linked it all to an app on their phones. "Look," David said, holding his screen up for me to see. It showed little icons for every part of my house, a tiny camera feed from my own hallway. "We can help you manage things from our place. If you forget to lock the door, we can do it for you. We can adjust the heat. You won't have to worry about a thing." Worry? I had never known such a profound and suffocating sense of worry in my life. The house, my sanctuary, the place I had retreated to after Richard's death, the one place that was truly mine, was now wired. It was no longer just a beautiful empty space. It felt occupied. It felt watched. When they finally left, the house was filled with a new sound. Not the familiar groan of the old foundation or the whisper of the wind through the eaves. It was a low electronic hum, a constant low-level thrum of anticipation. It was the sound of the Wi-Fi signals and data streams crisscrossing through the air, carrying pieces of my life away to a server I would never see. The whispers weren't just in my head anymore. They were in the walls. They were in the silent, blinking red light on the new camera in the hall. They had seen the bars of my gilded cage and decided they weren't strong enough. So they were building a new one around me, stronger and more insidious, one I couldn't see, but one I could feel closing in with every passing hour. They weren't just taking my house. They were taking my reality. The first time I saw my dead husband, I thought the final thread of my sanity had snapped. I had spent a lifetime fearing Richard's judgment, his cold presence filling a room even when he was silent. After he died, the silence he left behind was a relief, a vast open space where I could finally breathe. But now, they were bringing him back. It was a Tuesday night, the kind of wet, blustery evening on the Oregon coast, where the wind sounds like a lonely animal crying outside the windows. I was trying to create an island of normalcy for myself. I'd made a pot of chamomile tea and was curled up on the sofa, watching one of those gentle British baking shows on the enormous smart TV they'd insisted on installing. "The resolution is incredible, Mom. You'll feel like you're right there," David had said. I didn't want to be right there. I just wanted to watch someone pipe icing onto a scone. Suddenly, in the middle of a segment about choux pastry, the screen glitched. It dissolved into a spray of colored static, like a firework, and then went completely black. The sound cut out. The only light in the room was the faint glow of the new smart hub on the kitchen counter. I sat up straight, my heart giving a little flutter of alarm. I reached for the remote on the coffee table. Before my fingers could touch it, a face flickered into existence on the screen. It was Richard. Not a photograph. Not an old home movie. It was him. His face filled the 70-inch screen, perfectly rendered, impossibly real. It was Richard as I remembered him from 10 years ago, before the illness had hollowed out his cheeks. The same silvered hair, combed severely back from his forehead. The same thin, unsmiling lips. And the eyes, those same cold gray eyes that had assessed and dismissed me for 3 decades. He looked straight out of the screen, not at a camera, but at me. Then, the speakers, which a moment before had been filled with polite British accents, boomed with his voice. It was his exact timbre, his precise, cutting baritone. It was a perfect digital resurrection. "Emma," the voice said. It wasn't shouting. It was worse. It was his signature tone of profound disappointment. "You're letting things fall apart. Look at this place. You're a burden, Emma. You've always been a burden." A choked sound escaped my throat. I stared, frozen. My mind was screaming. "He's dead. You buried him. This isn't real." "The house is too much for you," the ghost in the machine continued, its gaze unwavering. "You were never capable of managing things on your own. Let the boy handle it. David knows what's best. He has my head for these things. You just get in the way." I finally broke free from the paralysis. I screamed, a raw, ragged sound that was swallowed by the storm outside. And I grabbed the remote, my fingers fumbling, jabbing at the power button. Nothing happened. I aimed it at the screen, pressing again and again, my thumb jamming the button down with all my strength. The screen remained on. Richard's face remained, his lips curled in that familiar, condescending sneer. The image stayed there for a full, agonizing minute. An eternity. His disappointed eyes bored into me, stripping away the fragile peace I had built over the last 10 years, replacing it with the old, familiar terror, He was judging me from beyond the grave, and our son was his messenger. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, the screen went black again. After a second, the baking show flickered back on. A woman was smiling, holding up a perfectly golden tray of profiteroles. The cheerful music played as if nothing had happened. I didn't move. I sat there, my body rigid, heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The remote had fallen from my numb fingers. The silence of the house rushed back in, but it was different now. It was heavier. It was filled with the echo of that voice. I knew he was dead. I had the death certificate. I had scattered his ashes myself into the cold Pacific, watching them disappear into the gray foam. But the image had been so real, the condemnation so utterly, horribly familiar. It was every dismissive word he had ever said to me, distilled into one final posthumous verdict. And in that moment of pure, undiluted terror, a sliver of ice-cold clarity pierced through the fog. This wasn't a ghost. This wasn't dementia. The malfunctioning thermostat, the moved figurine, they weren't random glitches or slips of my memory. They were the prologue. This was the main act. It was a performance, designed and executed with chilling precision. David and Sarah. They had the cameras to see when I was alone. They had the smart hub to control the television. They had found a way to weaponize my own memories against me. They weren't just trying to manage my finances or take my house. They were trying to dismantle my mind, piece by piece. They were going to make me believe I was losing my grip on reality, so that when they finally came to take everything, I would be too confused and terrified to fight back. They weren't just waiting for me to fade away. They were actively, cruelly, trying to erase me. The fear inside me didn't vanish, but something else began to crystallize around it. A cold, hard resolve. They had resurrected my tormentor. They had no idea they had also resurrected the woman who had learned how to survive him. The days after David's visit bled into one another. A smear of gray fear against the backdrop of the gray sea. The house had become my tormentor. I'd wake in the morning not to the sound of gulls, but to the hum of the refrigerator, wondering if it was louder than yesterday. I'd walk past the thermostat and feel a prickle of sweat on my neck, certain the numbers would be different from how I left them. I began to live my life in a state of constant low-grade dread, a prisoner who paces her cell, testing the bars, knowing they are solid, but hoping for a miracle. I found myself huddled in the big armchair in the living room, the one Richard always claimed, wrapped in 3 separate blankets, even though the spring sun was trying its best to warm the glass of the bay window. I was cold from the inside out. I was afraid to touch anything. Afraid of what the house might do next. Afraid of the reflection that might appear in a dark screen. That's how Lily found me. The sound of her old sedan crunching on the gravel driveway was the first real, undoctored noise I'd heard in what felt like a lifetime. When she walked in, she didn't just call out a greeting. She felt the chill in the room. She saw me, truly saw me, balled up in the chair like a hedgehog. "Grandma, what's wrong?" Her voice was everything her father's was not. It held no judgment, no impatience, just a clean, clear note of concern. Her brow, so much like mine, furrowed. "It's freezing in here." I couldn't speak at first. The shame was a physical thing, a knot of old yarn in my throat. How could I explain this? How could I tell this bright, beautiful girl that I was being haunted by my own home, at the hands of her father? "Your parents. They think I'm going crazy," I finally whispered. The words came out thin and brittle, like dying leaves. She knelt by the armchair, her knees popping softly. She took my hand, her skin warm and alive against my icy fingers. "Dad said you've been a bit confused lately," she said gently, her eyes watching mine carefully. David had gotten to her first, of course. He'd primed her, planted the seed of my supposed incompetence. He'd probably used that same reasonable, caring tone he used with me, the one that made my skin crawl. But Lily was different. She wasn't just Richard's granddaughter, she was my mother's great-granddaughter, and that line was made of stronger, smarter stuff. She was in her 3rd year of computer science at a top university in Portland, a world of logic and systems I couldn't begin to comprehend. Where David and Sarah saw a deteriorating mind, Lily saw an equation that didn't add up. I took a breath and the dam broke. I told her everything. The thermostat that danced to its own tune. The book on naval history that migrated from the shelf to the kitchen counter. The television, and the face that appeared on it. The ghost of her grandfather, his voice coming from the speakers, telling me I was a burden. As I spoke, I watched her face, expecting to see pity, or worse, the careful, placating look of someone humoring a senile relative. I saw neither. Her expression shifted from concern to intense concentration. She wasn't listening to a ghost story. She was processing data. "The TV," she said, her voice sharp with focus. "It wouldn't turn off?" "No, not with the remote, not with the button on the set. It stayed on for a full minute, maybe more. And then it just went black." "And the thermostat changes. Do they happen at specific times?" "I don't know. I just notice it suddenly freezing or sweltering. David said it's the smart system learning my preferences." Lily let out a short, sharp breath that wasn't quite a laugh. "Learning your preferences. Right." She stood up, her eyes scanning the room, not at the furniture, but at the small, blinking lights I'd learned to ignore. The router in the corner, the sleek white disk of the smart hub on the mantel. "Let me see the hub," she said, her tone all business now. She pulled her laptop from her bag, the action as natural to her as pulling on a sweater was to me. She didn't dismiss me. She didn't soothe me. She started troubleshooting. She connected a cable from her laptop to the hub, her fingers flying across the keyboard. A screen full of green and black text appeared, a language as foreign to me as ancient Greek. "This is a new model," she murmured, more to herself than to me. "A Kova 7. This is serious overkill for just running lights and a thermostat. This is enterprise-grade hardware. It's designed to manage an entire office building, not a 3-bedroom house." She looked from the screen to me, and for the first time, I saw the hard glint of suspicion in her eyes. It wasn't directed at me. "Dad said he and Sarah wanted to make things easier for you," she said slowly, testing the words. "That's what they told me, that they could help, adjust things from their house if I needed it." "Help," she repeated, her voice dripping with a sarcasm so profound it was almost elegant. "Grandma, giving someone remote access to a system this powerful isn't helping. It's giving them the keys to everything, the locks, the cameras, the network. They could literally listen to us through the smart speaker right now if they wanted to." She turned back to her laptop, her jaw tight. "He put a password on the admin panel. Of course he did." Her eyes narrowed. "But he's arrogant. He always uses the same patterns." For the next hour, she worked. The only sounds were the furious clatter of her keys and the distant cry of the gulls. I sat in the armchair, the blanket still around me, and watched her. I watched her fight a battle I didn't understand, on a field I couldn't see. And with every passing minute, a tiny, fragile bit of warmth began to grow in my chest. It wasn't hope, not yet. It was something far more basic. It was the feeling of being believed. In her analytical eyes, I saw not a confused old woman, but a witness. In her frustration with the password, I saw not pity, but the righteous anger of an expert who'd found a system being deliberately and maliciously misused. A seed of doubt about her parents, about the story they had so carefully constructed, was being planted in the fertile ground of her brilliant mind. And I knew, with a certainty that cut through the fog of my fear, that she would not rest until she had dug it up by the roots. The week after Lily left was a strange sort of purgatory. I existed in a state of suspended animation, waiting for a verdict. The house was quiet. The thermostat held steady. The television remained dark. It was almost more unnerving than the overt harassment. The silence felt charged, as if the puppet master was waiting in the wings, wondering why the puppet was no longer dancing. I spoke to David once on the phone. His voice was laced with that familiar saccharine concern. "Feeling any better, Mom? You sounded a little off when Lily was there." "I'm fine, David," I said, my voice flat. I was a terrible liar, but for the first time, I had a reason to be a good one. The message came late on a Tuesday night. I was reading in bed when my old tablet, a device I rarely used, chimed. I squinted at the screen. It was from an encrypted messaging app Lily had installed before she left. The sender ID was just a string of numbers. The message itself was in all caps. "Grandma, don't talk to Dad. Don't talk to Sarah. Not a word. I found it. I found all of it. Call me from the library payphone tomorrow at 10 a.m. Delete this message now." My heart hammered against my ribs. I did as she said, my thumb trembling as I dragged the message to the trash and then emptied it. The library. A payphone. It felt like something out of an old spy movie. It felt insane. But I trusted the cold, clear logic in Lily's instructions. The next morning, I drove into town, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. The library was quiet, smelling of old paper and floor wax. The payphone was tucked away in a small alcove near the restrooms, a relic from another time. At exactly 10, it rang, the sound jarringly loud in the silence. I picked it up. "Hello? Grandma, it's me." Lily's voice was tight, strained. "Are you alone? Can anyone hear you?" "I'm alone," I said, my voice a whisper. Okay, good. Listen to me. What I'm about to tell you is going to be difficult to hear. But you need to know. You're not confused. You're not paranoid. You're being targeted." She had spent every waking hour outside of her classes digging. Back at her university, with its powerful networks and resources, she hadn't just bypassed the password David had set. She had performed a full-scale digital forensic analysis. She burrowed deep into the home network's administrative logs, the system's hidden diary. "It was all there, Grandma," she said, her voice a low, angry hum. "They were sloppy, arrogant. They tried to cover their tracks, but they didn't know who they were up against." She explained it to me in simple terms, stripping away the technical jargon. She had found the records of every remote access command. Every time the thermostat had changed, every time a camera had been activated, a command had been sent from an outside IP address. She traced that address. It wasn't their home. It bounced around a bit, but the primary source, the one that correlated with the most significant glitches, was a public network. A coffee shop. A little place called The Daily Grind, less than 100 yards from Sarah's real estate office. The timestamps were irrefutable, matching my panicked calls to David down to the minute. "But that's not the worst of it," she said, and I heard her take a shaky breath. "They were stupid enough to link the system to a cloud storage account, a backup server. It was registered to a burner email address, but Sarah used her own credit card to pay for it, a prepaid card, but I found the transaction in the bank's public breach data from 2 years ago. It was a thread, I just had to pull it." The cloud server was a digital treasure chest of their cruelty. Hidden in a folder, she found dozens of audio clips, snippets of their conversations, recorded accidentally by the Smart Hub's always-on microphone. I could hear David's voice, impatient. "Just nudge it down to 60. That'll get her attention." Then Sarah's, sharp and clear. "Make sure you call her an hour later. Act surprised. We need to build the narrative." And then, in a folder labeled Projects, Lily found the video file. "Grandma?" Lily's voice cracked. The file name was Richard V1 MP4. The air left my lungs. Richard, version 1. "There were earlier versions," she continued, her voice thick with disgust. "Practice runs. Richard Test Alpha. Richard Lighting Test. They were using a deepfake program, a sophisticated one. In the earlier files, you can see them adjusting it, making the lines on his face deeper, adding more gray to his hair. They were refining the ghost." My mind reeled. The image on the screen hadn't just been a picture. It had been a performance, a construction, a weapon built pixel by pixel to destroy my sanity. "And then I found the audio," Lily said, her voice barely a whisper. "The audio they layered over the video. It was of them, laughing. I have a clip, Grandma. I'm so sorry, but you need to hear it." There was a click, and then Sarah's voice filled the line. It was bright, cheerful, and more monstrous than anything I could have imagined. "She'll totally buy it. She's so terrified of ending up in a home. Between this and us telling everyone how confused she's getting, she'll be begging to let us take over. By the time we're done, she'll sign anything just to get some peace. The house, the power of attorney, all of it." A sound followed, the sound of my son, David, laughing. It wasn't a mean laugh. It was a light, easy laugh. The laugh of someone who thought they had just told a clever joke. The line was silent for a moment. I stood in the dusty alcove of the library, the plastic receiver cold against my ear, and felt the world shift on its axis. The terror that had been my constant companion for weeks, that cold, clinging fog, did not disappear. It began to change. It was a metamorphosis, a terrifying alchemy happening in the depths of my soul. The fear was crystallizing. The immense pressure of their betrayal, the sheer, calculated malice of it, was compacting the terror into something else. Something cold and clear and hard. Something with sharp edges. A diamond being formed in the darkness. "Grandma, are you there?" "Yes," I said. My own voice sounded strange to me. It was low and steady, and utterly devoid of the tremor that had plagued it for so long. "Yes, Lily, I'm here. Send it all to me. Everything you found. Encrypt it. Send it now." The proof arrived as a single password-protected file. Seeing it all laid out, the logs, the file names, the waveforms of their laughter, my mind didn't flash to the ghost on the screen. It flashed back 40 years, to the real man, to Richard. To the outside world, Richard was a pillar of the community. Charismatic, successful, the man who'd built a small construction business into a regional powerhouse. David remembered a hero, a giant who could fix anything. I remembered the man in the car. We'd be at a dinner party, perhaps at the yacht club. He would be charming, holding court, placing a proprietary hand on the small of my back. He'd praise my cooking, my dress, my smile. "Isn't she wonderful?" he'd say to our friends, and I would blush, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. But then we would get in the car for the drive home. The engine would start, the door would close, and the mask would drop. Before we were even out of the parking lot, the debriefing would begin. "Why would you tell the Hendersons about your mother's arthritis?" he'd ask, his voice quiet, dangerous. "It makes us sound common. Ailing. Do you have any idea how important perception is, Emma?" I'd stammer an apology. I was just making conversation." "It was TMI. Too much information," he'd say, a phrase he'd picked up from a business magazine. "And when Bill was talking about the zoning commission, why did you interrupt with that story about the seagulls? You made yourself sound like a child." Frivolous. By the time we got home, the warmth from the party would be a distant memory, replaced by a familiar, chilling shame. He detailed every one of my perceived failings with the precision of an architect reviewing a flawed blueprint. He never raised his voice. He never had to. His disappointment was a weapon, and he wielded it with surgical skill. He controlled every cent. I was given a household allowance, a check he wrote out every Monday morning, as if I were a teenager managing my paper route money. When I once suggested we open a joint checking account, he had laughed. A soft, patronizing laugh. "Emma, darling, you're a wonderful wife and mother. But finance? It's a messy business. It would only worry that pretty little head of yours. You're too emotional to make sound financial decisions. Let me handle the important things." He suffocated me with that control. He belittled my thoughts so consistently that over the years, I began to believe him. I stopped offering opinions on politics or investments. I stopped telling stories at dinner parties. I learned to be quiet, to be decorative, to not trust my own mind. My world shrank to the walls of that house. And now, David, my son, his flesh and his blood. He was running the same play, using the same script. But he had updated it for a new century. He wasn't just repeating the pattern of his father. He had weaponized it with technology his father could only have dreamed of. Richard had used words to make me doubt my own sanity. David was using manufactured ghosts. Richard had isolated me financially. David was trying to seize control of my assets under the guise of helping a confused old woman. He was his father's son, but his cruelty was an evolution. It was more insidious, more technologically advanced, and somehow more personal. Richard, at least, had the excuse of his generation, of a time when men were simply expected to be in charge. David had no such excuse. He had chosen this. He had collaborated with his wife, and they had laughed about it. The pain of that realization was a physical blow. It knocked the air out of my lungs and left me gasping. But it was a clarifying pain. It burned away the fog of confusion and fear, leaving behind a stark, brutal landscape of truth. The grief that washed over me wasn't for the son I was losing in that moment. It was for the son I realized, with devastating certainty, I had never truly had. The loving, concerned boy I remembered was a ghost, a fiction I had told myself. The real David had been there all along, a quiet apprentice at his father's knee, learning the art of control, the architecture of pain. My fear, the thing that had held me hostage in my own home, was burning away, and in its place, all that was left were the cold, hard ashes of rage. Richard had believed he controlled all the money. He believed my world was circumscribed by the household allowance he doled out each week. But he, like David, underestimated me. He saw an emotional, frivolous woman. He didn't see the woman who balanced the books for her father's hardware store at 16. He didn't see the woman who read the Wall Street Journal he left on the coffee table. Not just the society pages, but the stock market reports. My secret began small. It started with the dividends from a few shares of ATT my mother had left me when she passed. It was a pittance, really. Richard had glanced at the certificate and dismissed it. Pin money, he'd called it. Buy yourself a new hat. He never asked about it again, so I didn't tell him when I had the dividend checks mailed not to our house, but to a P.O. box I rented in the next town over. I opened a bank account in my maiden name. It was my first act of silent rebellion. Over the decades, that small act grew into a system. Cash back from groceries, claimed on the receipt before I brought the bags in the house. A $5 bill here, a $10 bill there, tucked away in an old coffee can. I learned to sell old furniture, or dishware Richard had deemed clutter, to antique shops for cash. When I took up investing as a hobby, he found it quaint. He never bothered to track my small wins, the $50 I made on a pharmaceutical stock, the $100 I cleared on a tech startup. It was all play money to him. But I never played. I saved. I invested. I cultivated it. It was my escape fund. My what if Richard leaves me fund. My what if he gets sick fund. My what if I just can't take it anymore fund. Now it was my war chest. The morning after my call with Lily, the rage was still there, a cold, steady pilot light in my gut. I sat at my kitchen table, the damning digital file open on my tablet, and I made my first move. I didn't tremble. I didn't hesitate. I called the Federal Pension Services. I went through the security questions, my voice even and calm, and I instructed them to change the direct deposit information for my monthly pension check. All of it, the full $3,247. I had it redirected from the joint account I shared with David, the one he monitored so closely, to the account in my maiden name that he knew nothing about. It was a simple administrative change, but it felt like a revolution. The next day, I got in my car and drove north, along the coast, to Astoria. The town was weathered and real, smelling of salt and fish and industry. I parked near the wharf and walked to a small, loud restaurant that served fish and chips in red plastic baskets. In a booth at the back, a man with a kind, craggy face and eyes that had seen too many liars on a witness stand was waiting for me. Frank Kowalski. A retired litigator and one of Richard's oldest friends, or so Richard had thought. Frank and I had always shared a quiet understanding, a silent acknowledgement of Richard's true nature that was never spoken aloud. I hadn't seen him in years, not since his wife's funeral. He stood as I approached, wrapping me in a hug that felt like coming into a safe harbor. Emma, my God, it's good to see you. You look tired. I'm more than tired, Frank, I said, sliding into the booth. I'm at war. I didn't cry. I didn't break down. I laid it all out for him with the cold precision of a general briefing her command staff. The lie about the pension, the gaslighting, the thermostat, the ghost on the television, the deep fake, and finally, I slid my tablet across the greasy table and told him about Lily's discovery. I showed him the logs, the file names, the invoices. I played him the audio clip. Frank listened, his expression growing harder and colder with every word. The kindness in his eyes was replaced by a lawyer's flinty glare. The clatter and chatter of the restaurant faded into a dull roar. He didn't see a confused old woman reciting a paranoid fantasy. He saw evidence. He saw a conspiracy. He saw a victim of calculated, malicious elder abuse perpetrated by her own son. He listened to Sarah's voice, her smug pronouncement that I would sign anything just to get some peace. He stared at the tablet for a long moment after the audio ended, his jaw working silently. Then he looked up at me, and his eyes were blazing. "Emma," he said, his voice a low growl that cut through the noise of the restaurant. "These monsters, these greedy, soulless little monsters, they have picked a fight with the wrong grandmother." He reached across the table and put his hand over mine. His grip was firm, resolute. "We're not just going to defend," he said, the words hanging in the air like a sworn oath. "We're not going to get a restraining order or sue them for damages. We're going to annihilate them. We are going to burn their world to the ground." The quiet hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the house, a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. The meeting with Frank had concluded an hour ago. He had sat in the very armchair Richard used to favor, his retired lawyer's mind, usually placid as a lake, now churning with a quiet fury. At first, he'd listened with professional detachment, his fingers steepled, his expression unreadable. But as I laid out the story, punctuated by the digital evidence Lily had unearthed, his posture changed. He leaned forward, the detachment dissolving into a righteous anger that seemed to emanate from him in waves. "This isn't just greed, Emma," he had said, his voice a low growl. "This is calculated, psychological warfare. This is a felony. Several, in fact. Elder abuse, wire fraud. They've built their own prison, and we're going to make sure they're the ones who serve the time." His validation was like a cool balm on a burn I'd carried for decades. It wasn't just about the money or the house. It was about my sanity. For the first time, someone saw the bars of the cage David and Sarah had built around me, not as the ramblings of a confused old woman, but as cold, hard steel. Now the plan was in motion. It felt less like a plan for revenge and more like a blueprint for an elaborate, necessary demolition. Justice, not cruelty, was the objective. That's what I told myself anyway. My command center was the kitchen table. My general was a 19-year-old girl in a university dorm room 200 miles away, communicating via a secure video call on a new laptop Frank had insisted I buy. Lily's face was a study in concentration, framed by stray strands of dark hair that had escaped her messy bun. The faint glow of code reflected in her glasses. "Okay, Grandma," she said, her voice crisp and clear, cutting through the silence. "The framework is built. I'm calling it Operation Trojan Horse. A little on the nose, I know, but it fits. Explain it to me again, dear, like I'm 5. She smiled. A patient, genuine smile that was so unlike her father's. Think of their smart home system as a castle with a big, strong gate. David and Sarah have the only key. They can open and close the gate whenever they want. What I've built is a gift. A beautiful, shiny wooden horse that I'm going to leave right outside their gate." She brought up a screen share, showing me lines of green and white text that were meaningless to me. "This horse will look like a routine, mandatory security update from the manufacturer. David is obsessed with security. He'll see the notification on his phone, he'll read the official-looking release notes I've faked, and he'll click Accept to push the update to the house. He won't be able to resist." "And when he does?" I asked, my heart thumping a little faster. "When he accepts the gift." Lily's smile turned predatory. "The horse opens up. My code deploys. It doesn't break their gate. It simply installs a new invisible door. A door that only we have the key to. We'll have total, administrative-level control of every device connected to this network. The cameras, the thermostat, the locks, the speakers, and especially that monstrosity of a television in the living room. We'll be the ghosts in their machine. They'll lose all their remote access, and they won't even know it until it's too late." I felt a chill run down my spine. It was devious. It was perfect. But what if something goes wrong? What if he suspects something? "That's the beauty of it," she said, her confidence radiating through the screen. The code is cloaked. It mimics the exact digital signature of a real update from the company. To him, it will be indistinguishable from the real thing. The only risk is, well, there was a risk. What risk? My voice was sharp. I ran a simulation last night. The first version of the deployment script had a tiny flaw. It would have sent a confirmation email back to the system's registered admin account, David's account, containing a log of the route changes. He's tech-savvy enough that he might have gotten suspicious seeing that. I was up until 4 a.m., patching it. It's clean now. The only confirmation will be a simple "update successful" message on his app. He won't have a clue. The thought of it almost failing, of our one shot being blown by a single line of code, made my stomach clench. This was the razor's edge we were walking. While Lily forged our digital weapon, Frank handled the physical one. He called me the next afternoon. "Emma, I've found our notary," he said, and I could hear the satisfaction in his voice. Her name is Maria Rodriguez, ex-Portland PD, 20 years on the force, 10 as a detective specializing in fraud. Now she runs her own PI firm. She's sharp, she's tough, and she despises people like your son. Is she willing to do this? To go undercover? Willing, Emma? She was thrilled. I laid out the basics and she called it an elegant sting. She's sourced a professional-grade hidden camera, the kind that fits into the frame of a pair of glasses. The audio is crystal clear. She's already creating a fake identity online. Brenda, a mobile notary public with a handful of 5-star reviews from shell accounts. She's studying the notary laws and document requirements to be completely convincing. A team. For the first time in what felt like my entire life, I had a team. Lily, my digital warrior, Frank, my legal shield, and now Maria, our agent in the field. But this alliance came with a heavy price, my own performance. My role was the most difficult, the most corrosive to my own soul. I had to become the woman they believed I was. I had to be broken. The first dress rehearsal came that evening. David called, his voice laced with that infuriatingly patient tone he used when speaking to a child. "Just checking in, Mom. How are you feeling? Did you remember to take your evening pills?" I took a deep breath, picturing the terrified woman I'd seen in the security footage. I let my voice tremble, pitching it higher. "Oh, David, I don't know. The house. It feels so cold all the time." I was deliberately referencing the thermostat, one of their first tricks. "The thermostat is set to 72, Mom. I'm looking at it right now on my phone. It's perfectly warm." "Maybe you should put on a sweater." "I have a sweater on," I whispered, injecting a note of pathetic confusion. "It's just, I feel a draft. And the television, it made that noise again." A heavy sigh from his end. "Mom, we've been over this. It's an old house. The TV is just a smart TV. They do weird things. You're letting your imagination get the better of you." "I suppose you're right," I mumbled, letting my words trail off. "I'm sorry to be such a bother." "It's no bother, Mom. We just worry about you," he said, the lie sliding off his tongue with practiced ease. "Get some rest." I hung up the phone, and my hand was shaking, not from fear, but from the sheer effort of the deception. It was nauseating. I walked to the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. The face looking back was pale, the lines around my eyes etched deeper, not by age, but by this performance. Every lie I told them, every tremulous word and feigned moment of confusion, felt like swallowing a shard of glass. But with each shard, I felt a piece of my stolen power returning. They thought they were shaping my reality, but they were just reading from a script I was now writing. The final piece of the plan was the bait, and it had to be me. A week passed. A week of me playing the role of a woman spiraling into dementia. I'd call David about things that didn't happen. I'd forget conversations we'd just had. I left a pot of water on the stove until the smoke alarm went off, an event I knew they were monitoring, forcing Sarah to call me in a state of feigned panic. "Emma, you have to be more careful. What if you'd burned the house down?" Each act was a carefully placed stone on the path leading them to the trap. The exhaustion was immense. It was a constant state of hypervigilance, of being an actress in a one-woman show for an audience of 2. Lily and Frank were my remote directors. "A little more fragile in your voice, Grandma," Lily would advise. "Emma, you need to sound defeated, not just sad," Frank would say. Finally, the day came. Frank and Lily agreed they were ready. The Trojan horse was uploaded and waiting. Maria was on standby. It was time to make the call. I sat at the kitchen table, the phone in my hand feeling as heavy as a brick. My script, the words I had practiced over and over, was laid out in front of me, but I didn't need it. The words were burned into my mind. I took a deep, shaky breath, closed my eyes, and dialed. He answered on the second ring. "Mom?" I let a sob escape my lips, a dry, ragged sound I'd practiced until it was second nature. "David?" I cried, letting my voice crack with despair. The sound echoed in the house, a perfect performance of utter defeat. "David, I can't do this anymore." "Mom? Mom, what's wrong? Calm down." No, I can't," I wailed. Your father was right. He always said I was a burden. He was right. I'm just a burden to you and Sarah." The words tasted like acid, invoking Richard's ghost for my own purposes. You win. I'll sign the papers. I'll do it." There was a beat of silence on the other end. It was just a second, but in that second, I could feel the entire dynamic of our relationship shift. It was the sound of a predator sensing the final surrender of its prey. Then his voice came, thick and syrupy with false sympathy, but underneath it, I could hear the ringing of a cash register, the slam of a vault door, triumph. "Oh, Mom. Oh, honey. You're not a burden. You're doing the right thing. It's for the best. For everyone." "Whatever you want," I whispered, my voice choked. "The power of attorney. Selling the house. Whatever you want. Just make it all stop." "We will, Mom. We'll take care of everything now," he soothed. "Don't you worry about a thing. We'll be over on Saturday with the notary. We'll get it all sorted out. How about 2 p.m.? We can bring lunch." "Okay," I whispered. "Saturday." "You're so strong, Mom. I'm proud of you," he said. The hypocrisy was so profound it was almost artistic. I hung up the phone and sat in the ringing silence. I didn't feel strong. I felt hollowed out, scoured clean by the filth of my own necessary lies. An hour later, Lily sent me a screenshot from her phone. It was Sarah's Instagram story, a picture of a glass of expensive champagne held up against the backdrop of what looked like their patio. The caption read, "Big changes coming. Sometimes you have to clear out the old to make way for the new. Feeling blessed. #real estate. #family first. #future is bright. #family first." The words stared back at me from the screen. They had taken the bait, hook, line, and sinker. They had no idea they weren't planning a real estate closing. They were arranging their own public execution. The clock was ticking down to 2 p.m. on Saturday. The morning air on Saturday was thick with salt and anticipation. The hours crawled by, each tick of the grandfather clock in the hall sounding like a hammer blow. I moved through the house like a ghost, making sure every prop was in its place. Lily had been working remotely since dawn, running final diagnostics. A small, discreet icon on my new laptop glowed a steady green. The Trojan horse was nested, sleeping, inside the walls of my home. Our home. "Everything is green, Grandma," she confirmed over a quick, quiet call. "I have a direct, untraceable feed to the living room TV. I control the stream. When the time comes, I'll be watching through the main security camera over the fireplace. Just give me the signal." The signal. We had agreed on a simple phrase. I suppose it's time to sign my life away. The moment I said it, Lily would unleash hell. At 1:30, a modest sedan pulled into the driveway. A woman with a kind face and sharp, intelligent eyes got out. Maria. She was dressed in a conservative navy blue pantsuit, carrying a heavy leather briefcase. She was Brenda, the notary. She gave me a single, almost imperceptible nod as I let her in. "The subjects are 5 minutes out," she said in a low, professional voice, her Brenda persona not yet engaged. "Did a drive-by of their place. They left right on time. He was driving." She was on her phone, smiling. She adjusted the dark-rimmed glasses on her face. "Camera is live. Audio is clean. Just play your part, Emma. I'll handle the rest." I just nodded, my throat too tight to speak. We sat in silence, the air crackling with unspoken energy. Then, precisely at 2 o'clock, David's luxury SUV crunched up the gravel driveway. The doorbell chimed. I took one last, deep breath and went to answer it. There they were. David, his face arranged into a mask of solemn concern. Sarah, standing beside him, was practically vibrating with a glee she could barely contain, a predatory smile plastered on her face. She was holding a bag from a local upscale deli. "Mom," David said, enveloping me in a hug that felt like being wrapped in ice. "You're looking better." "We brought your favorite sandwiches," Sarah chirped, brushing past me into the house as if she already owned it. "Chicken salad on rye." They moved into the living room, David directing the proceedings like a funeral director. He cleared the coffee table, his movements efficient and proprietary. "Brenda, thank you so much for coming out on a Saturday," he said, turning to Maria. "It's my pleasure, Mr. Miller," Maria replied, her voice a perfect blend of cheerful and professional. "Shall we get started?" David spread a sheaf of documents across the polished wood of the table. The thick stack of paper was a physical representation of their victory power of attorney, a durable health directive. And the centerpiece, the listing agreement to sell my home, with Sarah named as the sole agent. "Now, Mom, this is for the best," David said, his voice soft and patronizing. He picked up a pen and held it out to me. "This just gives us the ability to help you manage things, so you don't have to worry anymore." My hand trembled as I reached for it. This was it. I looked from David's triumphant face to Sarah's greedy eyes. I took the pen. "I suppose," I said, my voice clear and steady, no longer playing the part. "It's time to sign my life away." As the last word left my lips, the 65-inch smart TV on the wall flickered to life. David frowned, momentarily annoyed. Damn technology, always acting up. He fumbled for the remote. "Sorry about this, Brenda." But the screen didn't show the home menu. It showed my face. My terrified, confused face, captured by their own camera a week prior. My voice, small and pleading, filled the room. "The house feels so cold all the time." David froze, his hand hovering over the remote. Sarah's smile vanished, replaced by a mask of confusion. Then the image cut away, replaced by a black screen with an audio waveform pulsing in the center. Sarah's voice, sharp and dismissive, echoed through the speakers. "She'll sign anything just to get some peace. The old woman is completely losing it." Sarah's face went bone white. She looked at David, then at the TV, then at me. "What is this? What the hell is this?" David was still staring at the screen, his mind struggling to process what was happening. It's a glitch. It must be a short..." But it wasn't a glitch. A montage began to play, orchestrated by Lily with the precision of a master conductor. A screenshot of the network logs, showing remote access from an IP address Lily had traced to a coffee shop next to Sarah's office. The timestamps matching every incident I had reported. A screen recording of David remotely lowering the thermostat while telling me it was warm. A video file pulled from their secret cloud server showing the two of them in their kitchen, laughing. "Did you see her face when I told her Richard's ghost was on the TV?" David snickered in the video. "Priceless." Sarah let out a small, strangled gasp. She grabbed her phone, her fingers flying across the screen. At the same moment, my own phone buzzed on the end table. A text from Lily. "Livestream is active on Sarah's company Facebook page and the Cannon Beach community news feed. They have about 3,000 viewers and climbing. they're loving it." Sarah looked up from her phone, her eyes wide with pure, unadulterated horror. Her career, her carefully curated image as a trusted local realtor, was being torched in real time, in front of her partners, her clients, her entire community. But Lily had saved the masterstroke for last. The screen went dark for a moment, and then an image faded in. It was him, Richard, a perfect deepfake, his face looking out from the screen, exactly as I remembered him. But the words that came from his mouth were not David and Sarah's clumsy imitations. They were his own, pulled from the cruel, yellowed letters I had saved in a box for 40 years. "You are nothing without me, Emma," the ghost of my husband said, his voice a cold, cutting baritone. "You are an anchor, a weight. You are an expense on a balance sheet that will never be reconciled." David stared at the screen, his face a canvas of crumbling disbelief. He wasn't seeing his son's prank anymore. He was seeing the father he had worshipped, the man he had tried to emulate, for the monster I had always known him to be. The hero of his entire life was a venomous, cruel stranger. The room was utterly silent, suffocated by the echo of my dead husband's cruelty. The only sound was the frantic, useless tapping of Sarah's fingers on her phone as she watched her professional life detonate online. The comments were likely flying, a digital mob descending. I could almost feel the heat from the blaze. David didn't move. He just stood there, his face slack, the carefully constructed world of his own superiority, built on the myth of his father, shattered into a million pieces around him. He looked lost, like a boy who had just seen the wizard behind the curtain and realized it was just a weak, pathetic man. Maria, our Brenda, cleared her throat. The sound cut through the silence like a gunshot. She stood up, taking off her glasses and deliberately polishing them on her jacket. When she spoke, the cheerful, slightly ditzy facade of Brenda the notary was gone, replaced by the pure, unyielding steel of a seasoned detective. "David and Sarah Miller," she said, her voice low and carrying to every corner of the room. "For the record, you are being recorded." She placed her glasses back on, the tiny camera lens glinting in the light. "Everything you have done, everything that has just been displayed, and your conspiracy to commit these acts constitutes multiple felonies under Oregon state law, including ORS 165.572, elder abuse, and federal wire fraud statutes." She reached into her briefcase, past the notary stamp, and pulled out a slim leather wallet, flipping it open. "My name is Maria Rodriguez. I'm a licensed private investigator." She placed her ID on the coffee table next to the unsigned power of attorney papers. "A complete, unedited copy of this recording, along with the server logs, cloud data, and sworn testimony from Mrs. Miller, is being delivered as we speak to the Clatsop County District Attorney's Office." Sarah made a small, choked sound, a cross between a sob and a hiccup. David finally tore his eyes away from the blank television screen. He looked at me. His expression was not one of guilt, or shame, or even anger. It was one of pure, profound betrayal. As if I were the villain, as if I had broken some sacred trust by refusing to be his victim. In his eyes, I saw the reflection of his father, the same shock, the same outrage that anyone, least of all me, would dare to defy him. I just looked back. My face was a calm, placid mask. I didn't smile. I didn't scowl. I let him see nothing. Because in that moment, I felt nothing, not triumph, not satisfaction, not the sweet taste of victory I had fantasized about. Just a vast, chilling, and profound emptiness. The verdict was in. They were guilty. And in securing their conviction, I had finally, irrevocably, lost my son. The son I once had, and the man he had chosen to become, were both dead to me. The house was quiet again, but this time, it was the silence of a tomb. The silence in the room was a physical thing. It was heavier than air, pressing down, suffocating the last echoes of David's shouted betrayal. Sarah stood frozen, a statue of disbelief, her phone still clutched in her hand, the screen dark. David's face was a ruin. The architecture of his arrogance collapsed, leaving only the raw foundation of shock and fury. He stared at me, but his eyes weren't seeing me, the mother he had tormented. They were seeing the architect of his destruction, Maria, the woman he thought was a notary, stood up. She unclipped a small badge from the inside of her blazer and held it up. It glinted under the living room lights. "Maria Sanchez, private investigator," she said, her voice calm and clear, cutting through the thick silence. "This entire meeting, including your arrival and your conversation in the car, has been recorded. The live stream on your wife's professional Facebook page, which currently has over 17,000 live viewers, is also being saved. All evidence will be turned over to the district attorney's office." The word live stream seemed to finally break the spell. Sarah let out a small, strangled gasp. Her eyes darted to her phone as if it were a snake. She fumbled with it, her fingers clumsy, but Lily's Trojan horse was absolute. She had no control. The digital stage they had built for my humiliation had become their public pillory. David took a step toward me, his hand half raised, not in a threat, but in a gesture of pathetic pleading. "Mom, how could you?" Before I could answer, the sound of sirens began to grow in the distance, a mournful wail rising from the quiet coastal streets. It was the sound of consequences arriving. The sound I had been waiting for. Lily had called them the moment the live stream went live, a final, precise step in our plan. The next hour was a blur of blue and red flashing lights painting the walls of my home, a chaotic ballet of uniformed officers and quiet authority. I sat in my armchair, the same one where Richard used to sit, and watched. I watched them read David his rights. I watched Sarah begin to sob, not tears of remorse, but tears of self-pity as they placed her hands behind her back. I saw David look at me one last time before they led him out the door. His eyes were no longer full of rage. They were hollowed out, filled with the devastating understanding that he had not just been caught, he had been comprehensively and utterly defeated. And by me. The forgetful, frail old woman he had so casually decided to discard. I didn't feel a surge of triumph. I didn't feel the sweet rush of victory Frank had warned me I might not. I just felt quiet. It was the quiet of a storm that has passed, leaving devastation in its wake, the air tasting of ozone and loss. Lily came and put her arm around my shoulders. Her presence was a warm, solid anchor in the disorienting sea of flashing lights and official voices. The fallout wasn't just swift, it was a digital wildfire. The story was everywhere. It started as a local scandal, the lead story on the evening news. Then it went national. They had names for it. The TikTok takedown was the one that stuck, a catchy, trivializing label for the profound betrayal I had endured. Another headline called me the gaslight grandma who fought back. My private pain became public consumption, analyzed on morning talk shows, debated in endless comment threads, and turned into memes that flashed across millions of screens. They tried to fight back, of course. From a legal defense fund scraped together by Sarah's bewildered parents, they hired a lawyer who immediately went on the offensive. Their narrative was predictable and poisonous. I was a vindictive, senile old woman. I was confused, paranoid. Lily, my brilliant, loyal granddaughter, was painted as a manipulative hacker who had preyed on my failing mind, orchestrating the entire thing for her own twisted reasons, perhaps to gain control of my estate herself. They tried to use the very weapons against me that they had used before, my age, my supposed fragility. But this time, the world was watching. And this time, I had proof. The digital breadcrumbs they'd left were a feast for the prosecution. The server logs, the audio files of them mocking me, the video of Sarah rehearsing her concerned daughter-in-law act, and the pièce de résistance, the 17,000 people who had watched them walk into my house, smug and victorious, ready to sign the papers that would strip me of everything. The months leading up to the trial were a different kind of prison. My house, now free of their surveillance, still felt like a cage of memories. I was hounded by reporters. Every trip to the grocery store felt like a public appearance. Some people would stop me, their eyes wide with sympathy, telling me I was brave. Others would stare, whispering behind their hands. I became a character in my own life story, and I hated it. Frank was my shield. He handled the media, issuing terse, no comments, and protecting my privacy with the ferocity of a bulldog. Lily was my lifeline. She moved in with me for a while, filling the house with the quiet hum of her laptop and the smell of fresh coffee. She curated my online experience, showing me the messages of support from women all over the world who had felt unheard, who saw a piece of their own struggle in my story. They called me a hero. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like a survivor, and the two are not the same. Then came the day I had to testify. The courtroom was cold, impersonal. The air was stale with the scent of old paper and nervous sweat. I sat in the witness box, my hands resting on the smooth, cool wood. My black dress felt like armor. I had chosen it carefully. I would not look like a victim. I would not look frail. The prosecutor's questions were gentle, guiding me through the timeline of events, the installation of the smart home hub, the thermostat, the moving objects, the ghost of my husband on the television. I spoke clearly, my voice steady. I did not embellish. I did not need to. The truth was monstrous enough on its own. Then came the cross-examination. David's lawyer was sharp, his suit expensive, his questions designed to chip away at my credibility. "Mrs. Albright," he began, his tone oozing a false sympathy. "You've stated you were married to your husband, Richard, for nearly 50 years, is that correct?" 48 years, I corrected him. "And would you describe it as a happy marriage?" "Objection," the prosecutor said, rising. "Relevance?" "Goes to the witness's state of mind, Your Honor," the defense lawyer countered smoothly. "Her perception of reality." The judge, a stern-looking woman with tired eyes, waved a hand. "I'll allow it, but keep it brief, counselor." I looked at the lawyer. "It was a complicated marriage." "Complicated," he repeated, tasting the word. "Your husband was a forceful personality, was he not? Some might say controlling." "Yes. And you felt trapped, didn't you? For many years you felt like you were living in a cage." "Yes," I said again, my voice a little quieter. I knew where he was going. He was trying to build a narrative that my entire life had been a prison, and David was just the latest jailer in a long line, that my reaction was a disproportionate, hysterical response to a lifetime of repression. "So when your son, your only child, tried to help you, tried to make your life safer with modern technology, your mind, already conditioned by decades of feeling controlled, twisted his actions into something malicious. Isn't that what happened, Mrs. Albright? You saw your husband in your son, and you lashed out." I took a breath. I looked past the lawyer, past the jury, and I let my eyes find David. He was sitting at the defendant's table, next to Sarah. He was thinner now, his face gaunt, the confident swagger replaced by a permanent slump in his shoulders. He wouldn't meet my gaze. He stared at his hands, folded on the table. And in that moment, all I could feel was a sorrow so profound, it felt like a physical weight in my chest. It was an ache for the little boy with sandy hair who used to hold my hand so tightly at the beach, the teenager who I'd taught to drive in the high school parking lot, the young man I had been so proud of on his college graduation day. Where did he go? When did the rot set in? Did I miss it? Was I so caught up in my own quiet survival with Richard that I failed to see the same poison taking root in my son? I turned my attention back to the lawyer. I let the silence hang in the air for a moment before I spoke, my voice devoid of the emotion churning inside me. "No," I said. "That is not what happened. My husband controlled me with his temper and his disapproval. He made me feel small. My son used technology to try and convince me I was losing my mind. He exploited my love for him. He and his wife projected an image of my dead husband onto a television screen and used his memory to torment me. They didn't do it to help me. They did it so they could get a court to declare me incompetent. They did it so they could take my house and sell it. One was cruelty born of ego. The other was cruelty born of greed. I am intimately familiar with both, and I assure you, I can tell the difference." A murmur went through the courtroom. The lawyer's smug expression faltered. He had no more questions. I won. Of course I won. The evidence was a mountain they could not climb. David and Sarah were found guilty on multiple counts: conspiracy, fraud, elder abuse. The sentences were significant. They lost their careers. Their friends evaporated. They lost their freedom. I won the house. I won my independence. I won the legal battle. But as I walked out of the courthouse, past the cameras and the reporters shouting my name, I felt no elation. I felt only the final, terrible truth settle into my bones. My son was gone. He had been gone for a long time, and I had just been forced to watch the public burial. The silence in the house was different now. For the first few weeks after the verdict, it was a heavy, suffocating blanket of echoes. Every room held a ghost. Richard's ghost in the armchair, David's ghost in the hallway, his childhood height marked in pencil on the doorframe, even my own ghost, the woman who had paced these floors in fear and confusion. The house had been my sanctuary, then my prison, and now it was a mausoleum. I couldn't breathe in it anymore, so I called a realtor. 6 months after the verdict, a bright red "for sale" sign stands on my front lawn. My sign, my decision. The neat block letters feel like a declaration of independence. The house is no longer a cage or a fortress. It's just a property, a collection of wood and nails and glass. It's an asset, and I am liquidating it to fund my future, a future that belongs only to me. Packing was a form of archaeology. I unearthed layers of my own life. I found shoeboxes full of letters from Richard, written during his business trips. I read one, his familiar, condescending tone scrawled in neat cursive. I didn't feel anger. I felt nothing. I threw the box away. I found David's old report cards, a string of perfect grades and glowing teacher comments. I found his Little League trophies. I packed one small photo of him, taken on his 5th birthday. He's grinning, a smear of chocolate cake on his cheek, his eyes bright and full of uncomplicated joy. I packed that boy, the man he became, I left behind for the house to hold. This morning, the air is clean and tastes of salt. Lily and I are sitting on the cold sand of Cannon Beach, a thermos of coffee between us, watching the sun begin its slow climb behind the immense, dark shape of Haystack Rock. The sky is blushing with pale pink and soft orange, the colors of a new bruise or a new beginning. We don't talk about David or Sarah. Their names are ghosts of a different kind, and we have agreed to let them rest. Instead, we talk about her classes. She's diving into cybersecurity ethics, she tells me, her eyes alight. She wants to build systems that protect people like me, not entrap them. I listen, and I feel a swell of pride so fierce it almost hurts. She is everything that is good and strong, a continuation of some resilient part of me I never knew I had. I was looking at flights, I say, pouring more coffee into her cup. To Rome. Her face breaks into a wide smile. Seriously? Seriously. I've always wanted to see the Colosseum, the Sistine Chapel. I want to eat pasta until I can't move and drink wine in a little cafe. We could go in the spring. I would love that, Grandma, she says, her voice soft. We fall silent again, watching the light change, watching the waves roll in and smooth the sand, erasing all the footprints from the day before, the sheer cleansing power of it. After a long while, Lily turns to me, her expression thoughtful. Are you happy, Grandma? She asks quietly. I consider the question. The word happy feels inadequate. It's a bright, simple word, and my emotional landscape is no longer simple. It's a place of deep valleys and hard-won peaks. The scars are there, the phantom ache of a lost son, the memory of a loveless marriage. They are a part of my geography now, like the ancient rock rising from the sea in front of us. They can't be removed, but they are not all I am. I am the woman who learned to have secrets to survive. I am the woman who built a war fund, dollar by dollar. I am the woman who faced down the ghost of her husband and the greed of her son. I am the woman who reclaimed her own mind, her own home, her own story. I am not broken. I'm free, Lily, I say, and the words feel like the truest thing I have ever spoken. It's not the giddy happiness of a fairy tale ending. It's something deeper, more solid. It is the quiet, profound peace of a long war finally being over. I have survived my husband. I have survived my son. I have faced the ghosts of my past, both real and manufactured, and I have won. The sun finally clears the horizon, and its light, so new and clean, spills across the water, turning the waves to liquid gold. It's warm on my face. I close my eyes and breathe in the salt air. I am 72 years old, and my story is just beginning. My freedom wasn't given to me. I had to take it back, piece by piece. My story is proof that the cage is only as strong as you allow it to be. What cage in your own life are you ready to break open? Let me know in the comments below, and let's talk about what freedom looks like for you.